What are we on now? Oh, we're on water reform consultation. Straight to Margot and Lexi.
Thank you.
No, my.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, so hopefully you've had a chance to have a wee break and a refreshment, get some energy to talk about the excitement that is local water done well consultation. Okay, so what we will do is we will just crack on, conscious that you have had quite an afternoon. So look, really today is catching you up on how things have progressed since we last got together on water reform, which was back in December the 11th. So there's been a few things that have progressed that we want to share with you, and also probably more importantly to bring you up to speed on the approach we're taking to consultation so that you're across that and comfortable with that, and really I guess just comfortable and getting the sense of direction we're taking. So just to recap, because you've got a lot going on, to help you remember where we landed in December. So LTP committee met on the 11th of December, and it was determined that we would go out to consultation with three options, with the preferred option being a multi-council CCO along with Porirua, Hutt City, Upper Hutt and Greater Wellington Regional Council. The second option was a go-alone CCO, and as we're required to, also consulting on the current arrangements. We also confirmed that in terms of consultation, to really take into account the impact on our community, that consultation would be run alongside the annual plan long-term amendment consultation, so it would be done in conjunction. The other excitement that happened in December was the day before we met, the third piece of legislation was introduced to the House, and it caused a bit of a flurry, especially for those at our end of the table, because there are some things in there that we didn't have enough time to understand before we met with you on the 11th. So at that time, the submission date hadn't been confirmed, and we hadn't had enough time to really understand any impacts that might be relevant to the decisions we were asking you to make on the 11th. So we have had time to do all that now, and so I will bring you up to speed on some of that, most of that, as we go through today. And so again, just to remind you of the timeline we're working to. So yes, we're here today to talk about consultation and engagement, but if we think beyond that period of 21 April or May actually, once we've completed hearings, June is an important time frame for us. That's roughly around when we're expecting the third piece of legislation to be enacted. And also that's when we'll be asking for a decision to be taken on what the final delivery model will look like for Wellington City Council. And that leads into August, which is the approval of the Water Services Delivery Plan, which was required to be submitted to DIA no later than the 3rd of September. So those are some very chunky dates we have in our mind that are driving us in our timeframes. Okay, that's enough about looking back. Let's look forward to consultation. So what I will share with you today is a flavour of the key messages that we will be including in the consultation document. But before we delve into that, what I wanted to share with you is just at a more macro level, if you like, the top-down view on the approach we're taking. So you've already been briefed today around the approach for annual plan and long-term plan. That was with Baz and Rainer, so I won't go into that again. But two things to draw your attention to is that we have had confirmation from the Officer of the Auditor General that water consultation is not required to go through the audit process. So slightly different time frame, but it will come. The documents will come back together on the 18th of March when we're asking you to adopt the consultation document. The other thing as well is that our partner councils are also consulting in and around the same time. So the conversation that we have out in the community, each of us, needs to be consistent so that we help the respective communities to have make sure their understanding is joined up, especially as we're talking about a broader community that is quite mobile, how we commute, live, work and play in different parts of our region. So that's the approach we're taking, as I say, at a top-down level. So So the agreement we have with the partner councils is where at all possible is to have the same narrative, the same story as each other. So where we're talking about what would a multi-council CCO look like, we're all using the same description. Where we're talking about what the current arrangements are, we're all talking about the same description because, of course, that is contracted out to Wellington Water, of which we're all co-owners. So having that joined up narrative is really important. The investment pathway for the Metro CCO will be consistent. What will be localised to each council are things like the rates impact. So for a large part of our consultation conversation, it will be joint with the other councils, but there is and will be local flavour to that. And of course, because the water conversation will be part and parcel with annual plan and LTP, the look and feel of the document, the look and feel of the Let's Talk page will all be one and the same. So it will be very much a WCC conversation. All the way through this process and looking ahead as well, we very much are working with our Tākaihere partners, and it's very important that we do that. So our Tākaihere partners are a part of the Mayoral Advisory Oversight Group. And so decisions and information that is taken to the AOG very much includes our partners. The expectation we have is that the consultation document will include a statement or context from our partners around the importance of water and managing water from a mana whenua point of view. And as Lexi will talk more shortly around our engagement, we're also looking to have a session for our Māori community where hopefully our mana whenua partners will join us and we can have quite a focused conversation. So just wanted to give you assurance that our partners are very much part and parcel of both the consultation document and the engagement approach. A couple of things that are happening with our partner councils just to keep you in the loop if you're not already. So Greater Wellington Regional Council will be looking to consult not just on what is the preferred option, but also in terms of their role as a bulk water provider, and so how long will they stay as a shareholding owner. Upper Hutt City Council, as of last week I think it was, are still working through their options, and so they may still consult on a stormwater option. And then you may recall back in December, one of the concerns we had was the draft legislation, Bill 3, outlined a requirement to consult on 3 options. So we're still seeking legal clarification on that, but at this stage we're thinking that is in relation to once the water entity is established. So right now that is draft legislation, and what we're working to is the legislation, which is the preliminary services arrangements, and that requires us to consult on current arrangements and one alternate option as a minimum. So that is the minimum we are required to do, and we are definitely doing that. But just to also give you some comfort that we are making sure that from a legal perspective that what we are planning to consult on does meet with the Water Services Preliminary Arrangements Act, so we're getting some external advice plus our own in-house legal people as well. So, what can you expect to see? Before we talk about the individual options, we will be setting the scene for our communities to understand A, what has triggered the need for this consultation, and B, how water works in our wider region. So we need to make sure our communities understand that the way water services are being delivered, or will be delivered, is changing, and it needs to change because the government has introduced the local water done well reforms. Doing nothing is not an option, and we need to help our community understand that doing nothing is not an option. The scene setter, I do think, is quite important because I don't think most people have an understanding that when they turn the tap on that they know where the water comes from. I don't think some of our communities understand that when they flush the toilet, what happens to that wastewater, because it is not all of it is dealt with in the Wellington city immediate area. So, water sourced from Hutt River and some of the wastewater treated at Titahi Bay. So our interconnectedness in the region already exists, both from an infrastructure point of view, but also, as I've already touched on, the mobility of our community where people live, work and play. We all share water resources and we all use water services in different areas. So I do think that's quite important that we articulate that, just to help people understand what we around this table probably have quite a privilege to understand naturally. And of course, the other key message we do need to be sharing is around the significant investment that's needed to ensure everyone has access to safe and reliable water services. So that's some overarching messaging. So that will not be pages and pages of detail, but it certainly will set the scene. So then we delve into the three options. The preferred option being the Metro Multi-Council CCO. I won't take you through every single one of these points. I think some of them you will probably recall. But what we will be talking about is the preferred option to establish a Three Waters multi-council water organisation. Who the 5 councils are, and that those councils, along with Mana Whenua, have been working together for quite some time now to explore this option and to come up with what we feel is the best option to serve the wider community. Also clarifying that taking this option will enable council and councils plural to be eligible to access better borrowing arrangements through the Local Government Funding Authority, LGFA, which is a big benefit for the investment that's needed. A key thing I do think we need to focus on is what a decision you took towards the end of last year around a customer charter and making sure that the customer's voice and the customer requirements are front and centre of any future water organisation. Wellington Water, through the establishment of this new CCO, would be disestablished because the co-owners have chosen to go in a different route, and that including South Wairarapa too, of course. And water meters. So there is already a financial provision for water meter implementation in the 24-34 LTP, and so that intent is not changing. So that's at a high level the key messages that we would look to share around the preferred option. If we then touch on before we touch on that, I did just use a term there. So in that first bullet point, so a Three Waters multi-council water organisation. So the draft legislation has introduced the preference of terminology around the water organisation. So just to start getting ourselves used to that terminology, I will start using water organisation in brackets CCO. So they'll be a bit interchangeable for a little while, but I think we should start familiarising ourselves with that. So if you see water organisation, we're talking CCO. And a large part of a key reason for us getting used to that is under the draft legislation, the CCO is very different to the CCO we know and love today, or the CCO model. So it is quite different. So if we think about water organisation, it will have a different connotation. Okay, WCC only option. Probably as it says on the tin, so this is WCC going on its own, setting up a CCO. So again, still removed from WCC, but it is a CCO solely owned by WCC. An advantage of that would be it removes the need to negotiate with other councils, because you are setting the strategic direction and the statement of expectations yourself as a council and providing that to the new water entity. Similar messaging around water charges, water meters, that remains the same. We would also look to outline the impact to council's residual balance sheet, because it is slightly different to setting up a multi-council water organisation CCO. So that would be the key messages for a go alone. And then, as I've mentioned, by legislation or under legislation, we do need to include the current arrangements, which of course is each council owning the assets but contracting the services out to Wellington Water. In this conversation, we do need to make sure the community understands that through the Local Water Done Well reforms, that the regulatory environment will be significantly increased, which is part of the reason that do nothing is not an option. And the investment that's needed to meet that, that regulatory environment is not something we're currently set up to do. And of course, the affordability of the current arrangements is very limiting in terms of the investment that's needed for the infrastructure. Okay. Probably something that most of you are wanting to know is what is the question or the questions that we will be asking. So this is very much still in progress with the other councils. We are still working through trying to land the same or a very similar question, so that, again, thinking about the consistency of conversation in our respective communities. So the conversations that we've had with other councils so far, the questions are along these lines. Something like, which option do you believe will deliver the best long-term outcomes for our communities? Which delivery option do you think would work best for the Wellington metro area? Or which option do you believe best supports the delivery of safe and reliable drinking, waste and stormwater services? So much of a muchness there, it's just about some phraseology, but that's where our thinking is heading at present. So at the outset, I did mention around Bill 3. So Bill 3, introduced in December, is the Local Government Water Services Bill. Currently, not currently, but submissions are due on February 23rd. We are preparing a joint submission with the other councils. At this stage, we're expecting this draft legislation to be enacted mid-year, so May, June time. So what that means is that the decisions that we'll be asking you to make and the engagement with the community will be done in an environment where we're still unsure of some of what the actual legislation will look like. And so a couple of things in particular there around mana whenua partnership and engagement. The bill is not particularly clear on that. There are some statements around community and environmental impacts that need clarification, and there are some clauses around governance and accountability, which again needs greater clarification. So we won't be in a position to clarify any of those with you either before consultation or before decision making in June, at least as far as the timeline that we've been given is indicating. So that is really just to give you a heads up that that is the environment we're in, and we're the same as all other councils in that respect. And the good news is at this point you can stop listening to my dulcet tones as I hand over to Lexi.
So as Margot said, because of the concurrent timing with the LTP amendment consultation, the annual plan consultation and the water services delivery model consultation, we're planning a really joined up approach. And what that means in practice is a single campaign encouraging the public to have their say. The primary objectives for the engagement are to encourage and support people to participate and to submit via the correct processes, to build awareness of the consultation and any key dates and information, providing really clear, accessible information. We're working really closely with the other councils and the consultants to get the consultation document and the questions and the collateral in as plain English as possible. And to reduce consultation fatigue, the way that we're streamlining the process hopefully will lead to a kind of more collective approach and reduce the burden on community. We also know that formal consultation processes are easier to navigate for some groups than others, which means that we need to make an additional effort to support underrepresented groups to have their say. So to that end, we're going to be piloting audio and video submissions for this consultation to provide additional options for people to provide feedback to this joint consultation, and then we'll be evaluating whether that does indeed increase accessibility and engagement for our communities. So the comms and engagement approach to the consultation is kind of fourfold. We'll be using multi-channel promotion, and that's promotion across internal and external channels, supplemented by paid advertising. Digital channels are really great because they have benefits in reach and flexibility, accessibility, but we know that they're not accessible for everyone. And to that end, we're also proposing a citywide mail drop, which will be a brochure outlining the key consultation issues and the submission process. As usual, consultation materials and submission forms are going to be available in libraries and community centres during the consultation period. And as I said before, we're focusing on enhancing our accessibility through trialling video and audio submissions and through that citywide mail drop. We'll also be reaching out into our networks to help us streamline engagement with the community and kind of minimise fatigue and to reach those who are passionate about the topics of consultation. We're planning drop-in sessions in each ward and a targeted approach for Māori and ethnic communities and rangatahi. And we're doing bespoke sessions for bids, community boards and advisory groups. We're also taking a collective approach with the other councils where possible, so we're planning a joint hui at some point. Producing a suite of digital and physical resources, so that will include information packs, obviously the Let's Talk page, a digital explainer series of videos for social media, an email campaign, and then we have an interactive Q&A function on Let's Talk. So that kind of wide range of materials are tailored to be flexible for our audience's needs. And as always, our focus is going to be on creating a safe and constructive space for dialogue.
And here we go on the lucky last slide. So just to summarise what happens next. So if we work back from 20th of March, where consultation commences. So 18th of March is when the consultation document in its entirety will come to you for adoption. So working back from there, that's a really important date. So we will next come to you on the 26th of February, and at that time we will bring to you the consultation content, and that will include financial impacts as well, because that's still being worked on at the moment. So you'll get to see what it will look like, what it will feel like as a cohesive story. Working back from that again, next Friday, the 14th, there is the Regional Mayoral Forum, and that's when the mayors will be looking at that shared consultation content and making sure that as a group they are comfortable with that. So the reason for raising that here is that if there is anything that there is a particular allergic reaction to, it would be really good to get visibility of that ahead of the Mayoral Forum next Friday, because once we get through that, we are really into the time frame of working with our print timeline, so that we've got enough time to finalise content to make sure we hit those print deadlines for the 20th of March. Okay, great, thank you. I will now stop talking and questions.
All right, Councillor Pennant.
Thank you for your presentation. I've got a number of questions. I'll just go do three. Sorry, where are we on stormwater? Are we going to be able to explain what the council's role and what a new entity will be doing?
Yes, so stormwater, well, so the two options. So if we take the current arrangements out of the equation, so the two options, the regional and the go alone, each of those are 3 waters, and so that is the piped network. And so we will make that clear that it's the piped network, and yet council will retain responsibility for the overland stormwater responsibility. Yeah.
Still a bit complex though. It's like transport. Other councils have taken quite a strong view, and obviously they've got different communities. How are we going to make sure that we get a very neutral response? Because, like some of them have been quite strong, and I would hope that we'd have a very open conversation.
That is, thank you, Councillor. Yes, that is something we are working through at the moment, is trying to find that happy medium. And that's why I say as much as possible, it will be the same conversation that we're having with the community. So we do need to make sure it is neutral, because we cannot lead the conversation one way or the other.
my last question for now. All the options have an increase in water costs, which you seem to skip over quite lightly. So presumably there will be some explanation about that too, because obviously this is a really important consultation. It's going to be going with increase in rates as well. So how are you thinking about explaining why and what impact it will be on households and businesses?
So it is an important part of the conversation. What we do need to realise as well, that should the decision be made to establish a CCO, whether it's with other councils or alone, it would be that new organisation's responsibility to set the water charges. So that is an important factor we do need to make clear to the community that they understand. So whilst we may be able to give indications, it would not be a council decision to make.
Councillor McNulty.
Thank you. 3 from me. In terms of working with mana whenua, can we take it then that this multi-council controlled water organisation, that is their position of the Takahiri partners, that they support that establishment?
Absolutely, that is their absolute preferred option, that we take a regional, not a regional multi-council, but a regional geographical source to see approach.
In terms of the consultation document contents, I guess I was surprised to see nothing highlighting that the relationship between politicians to level of water investment is one of the most significant things. You know, we're about to hear a paper from Wellington Water assumedly asking for more money. That is going to be a decision of our table. That is not the status quo. Sorry, that is not the new format with the new organisation. So I guess I'd expect to see something along those lines.
In the consultation, we do need to talk about accountability arrangements. So we would be talking about, and we at the moment, the draft is looking like a table with advantages and disadvantages. So in there, we do outline the responsibility. So decision making, once the assets and revenue and everything is, or the new entity stood up, that decision making is now the responsibility of the new organisation, the board, and it's no longer a council decision. Yes, so we do make that clear in the advantages and disadvantages conversation.
I guess depending on who you're talking to, that may or may not be an advantage or a disadvantage. Last one, just the second format for the question, the consultation question, that seemed really problematic to me because it's saying our job is to say what's the best arrangement for Wellington City Council, not what's the best for the Wellington metro area. So I guess that second wording of the question seemed, you know, at odds to be asking people that for a consultation when that's not our responsibility. It's about Wellington City.
I hope my Greater Wellington counterparts don't mind me saying this, but that is one of their draft questions. So from their perspective, that would make sense as the regional council. But I hear what you're saying, Councillor. From our perspective, that is not necessarily our focus. So I take that on board. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Phone.
Yeah, kia ora. Will we discuss the amount and the affordability of the significant investment that will be needed for water? Because I think this is an important discussion for our communities to understand what the trajectory looks like.
So yes, investment pathway is one of the things that we will be talking about, and that's being modelled at the moment. Yeah. And that is it is likely to be the same across the two options, if not very similar, because just because we would choose to go on our own, we wouldn't necessarily choose to invest 3 times more, 3 times less. The investment needed is the investment needed, and that's the level of detail we're working through at the moment.
Yeah, great. Okay, cool, and good. And just in terms of timing of consultation, so just to check, Lexi, was this going to be alongside the LTP so you'll pulse along together rather than having separate sessions?
Correct.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Randall.
Thank you. First question is, there's been an ongoing issue with the different debt levels that are associated with the water assets of the different councils. Is there going to be information about the let's call it the true-up or the adjustments that need to be made if we join the regional entity as part of the finance information?
Absolutely. That is a key part of the conversation we need to share with the community, and it's a key part of the financial modelling that we need to do.
Okay. In terms of getting some showstoppers by next Friday to the Mayor for the first mayoral forum, I guess the accountability and transparency, and I guess the ability to influence efficiency is, for me, and I think other councillors, a critical element. That goes towards the governance options, and you say there's a sort of there's sort of different to's and fro's, but I've still got no information. So is it possible to get some information about the governance options? For example, Wellington City is 50% of the new entity, so do we get 50% of the votes and this sort of stuff? And is that information going to be provided to us so that we can comment by next Friday?
Councillor, I would suggest there's two parts to answering that question. The first is from a legislation point of view. So the governance and accountability arrangements as per the legislation are in Bill 3. And that's, I alluded to just before, that it is not entirely clear in the bill as it's drafted what would be expected or required. So currently with the CCO, under the LGA, the governance requirements are not particularly prescriptive. Under this water services bill, the requirements are very prescriptive, which is not in line with previous government policy around the flexibility to local communities to do local water well. So we're seeking advice on that. So from a legislative point of view, all we can do is give you advice and a heads up as to what's in the bill. Secondly, if you can cast your mind back to December, we had some conversations around this table around governance, and we are not at a point to have those where we've had those conversations with the other councils around what the shareholding options might look like. And so we're still not at that point. So long answer to your question, Councillor, that information won't be available for consultation.
Okay. Okay, I'll say that goes to my third question. In terms of the legislation, your understanding, if the Wellington City decides to join a regional entity, is it permitted under the legislation to exit it if it does not work out in terms of service to Wellington City residents?
There are definitely exit provisions. Whether it specifies exactly reasons why, I can't, not off the top of my head, I can't say, but there are definitely exit provisions, as there would be always. And also that would come to how the organisation is established in terms of its constitution as well.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor O'Neill.
Kia ora. My first partai is just around a resolution that we passed in December, that the condition for Wellington City Council joining the group entity was an equitable debt transfer. What has that ended up meaning in effect? Do we know a number?
Kia ora, Councillor. We don't know a number at this point because that's going to depend on how much we invest over the coming year and how much we actually spend. So that number will continue to evolve. The key thing that we are looking for is agreement of the other councils that are joining this region to make sure that they're comfortable with that approach, and that we can get an in-principle agreement and then go in to negotiate for that. At this stage, we understand at the AOG meeting on the 14th of February that discussion will be held. Yeah.
Cool. Leading on from that, I understand we probably are the only TA in the whole country that would not be sort of following the standard debt transfer process. Like we've come up with our own equation. I guess how are we going to be able to have that discussion clearly, both with our partners politically, but also in our public consultation on it, but noting Porirua will have to consult on it and the hut will have to explain it as well. How are we able to kind of work through that?
Yeah, it is complicated. I think there's one other council in New Zealand that's in a similar position to us, and from memory, I cannot remember who that is. And equally, that doesn't mean that they're going through the same process, right? So it is something that we're going to have to really carefully explain. We have been really open and working with the region and sharing all the information that we've got, and we've been working with the other CFOs to, I guess, commission information that shows the positions and the different positions of the councils, and the fact that we are different to them and they would be better off in terms of a regional model. It's going to be really hard to communicate this in a really plain English way, and again, we'll be working with the other councils in earnest to do that and work with them. But certainly we're looking to collaborate with them, and they understand the value of Wellington City Council being in the tent because, we bring the biggest level of revenue to this model. So, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Councillor Chung.
Good thing about being last to ask the question is that some of the questions have been answered.
You're not last, right?
Okay. I think it's very important before we go to consultation to actually understand the exact cost differences between going with the joint entity and going it alone. Now, I seem to recall that the central government, and also Simeon Brown at that time, said that his preference was actually to have a joint entity. Now, was the reason for that because it was actually going to reduce the costs?
I don't think I would be the best person to answer what the minister's desires were, but the advice that's come out, or the government's policy advice, is really around the flexibility that a larger organisation should be able to provide, and the responsiveness and the economies of scale to provide to a community. But whether that is entirely what the drivers were, I couldn't comment, Councillor.
Okay, thanks. Second question. So the advantage, you mentioned that one of the advantages of going it alone is that we don't need to consult and compromise with the other councils. But what else is there? There must be more other advantages and disadvantages, of course, as well. So are we going to specify those? I mean, you don't need to come up with them now, but we would need all that information.
Absolutely, yes. So there will be, similar for each of the options, there will be advantages and disadvantages listed for each. I just chose to highlight what the key ones are. But, and that one is, so, in comparison to having multiple parties around the table to come up with a single statement of expectations to provide to an entity, being able to do that yourself is a lot quicker and cleaner. So that is a key message. So yes, definitely there will be a full listing of advantages and disadvantages for each.
Great, thanks. And the last question is water meters. Now, you talk about water meters as being compulsory on whichever option we look at. Now, has there thought been given to making these water meters optional? So that is, if you wanted a water meter, you could actually put one in. If you don't want a water meter, then you can take a blanket or a amortised cost over it. Because I ask this question because it seems like the quotes that we've had for water meters seems to be extraordinarily high. Now, I take that because I've actually looked at that myself, and the plumbers that I've had changing the Toby said that, look, I can give you a water meter for $200. And so why is it that if we do all of Wellington, then of course the cost should be lower, because of course the cost of amortising, the cost of buying these should be much lower. So it should be significantly lower, not significantly more expensive.
I think we need your plumber's phone number, Councillor.
Right.
So just to be clear, we haven't said, and we don't intend on saying in consultation, that water meters are compulsory. What we are saying is that water meters will feature in each of the options as a mechanism to identify leaks, and then the more leaks we can reduce, the better performance and the less cost to the individual ratepayer. The other reason it features is because, as council, you have already determined through the LTP that implementation of water meters is likely, and therefore have made a funding provision in the long-term plan. So, taking and then the third option as well is the LGFA have already signalled that they would be looking for water meters to be implemented as an option as part of the funding arrangement that they have in place. So if you take those three things into account, water meters are likely, and we need to be really transparent with our community that that's the case. Now, if the water meters aren't implemented before the new entity is stood up, then that decision would be for the new entity to make, but we do need to make that quite clear.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Free.
Thank you.
Forgotten, never forgotten.
I may or may not be the last. I think that some excellent points have been made, so I'm not going to ask questions, but, the thing about the consultation, explaining our debt position, yeah. And I do think, is there any plans to give this some sort of focus during the great big lot of consultation we're going to be doing around the same time? Because this does seem to be a really permanent thing, even more permanent than an LTP or an annual plan, or even a Mātai Moana. So, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, your comments are duly noted and taken on board. And in terms of some prominence, yes, that is, so Lexi is very much interested in that and thinking of ways to do that, so it's not a attack on the last 5 minutes of a panel conversation or something like that. So we will need to make sure that there is sufficient focus for our communities, for sure.
Yeah, and I guess if I'm able to say so about the mayoral forum, there have been some comments made by other mayors around our, performance in the water space, which I certainly haven't been appreciated by myself. And I wonder if there's any way of tactfully saying that we were actually looking for, a more collaborative approach. Certainly not one that fires criticism off us. Collegial, yeah. Okay, that's my actual question is the regional council. So why are they thinking that they're going to consult on not being part of this, and how can they when they run the dams, or they're responsible for our water supply? How does that work?
So they will be consulting on a regional model and being part of the regional model. So that's definitely still in place. What they are looking at is what is their long-term role in this space and how might that change and how could that be done differently. So that's the conversation that they are wanting to have with the community. So they still very much will be part of the multi-council CCO.
And how will they engage with Wellingtonians on that?
So under the current legislation, each council must consult with the community.
Yeah.
And so we had, as a group of councils, we had looked at could we do one consultation that meets it all, but that would not meet the legislative requirements. So GWRC, like ourselves, must run a consultation process, and so they will be undergoing a similar exercise. So they will have a consultation document, they will have a let's talk kind of page, etc. So they too will be consulting at the same time, which comes back to why we need to have a consistent story, because we're all talking about the same thing.
I counted your comments as one, so that's 3 questions. Have you got one more quick one, Councillor?
Okay. I'm feeling that I'm not quite sure how it's going to work, having them consulting on something that's such a big issue when we're consulting on the similar big issue in the package of other big issues. And I wonder if there's room for a more joined up approach, just focusing on this water stuff.
When you say a more joined up approach, Councillor, can you help me out a little bit?
I just think this water thing needs to be separated out, and the regional Greater Wellington's consultation probably needs to be integrated with what we're doing.
It can't. Legislatively, they must undertake their own consultation. So that is something that, believe you me, we looked at.
Yeah.
Can we set up a single portal for all of Wellingtonians to engage with, etc.? But we just can't. Otherwise, we will run amok.
We've done it in the past. We've with transport issues like public transport.
This is because it's a specific piece of legislation. I think the answer you've been given, Councillor, is that it's as joined up as we can make it within the legal constraints that we have. All right. Now, I just want to check in that anybody who hasn't asked a question has one. And I'd like us to finish at 5:02 so we can have a little break before Wellington Water. So maybe one or two. Councillor Pannett, sorry, but we've got time limits.
Yeah, okay. So how are we going to explain the balance sheet issues? Because this is going to be very complicated for people. We're losing revenue. And also, I'm just concerned about this is quite a sanitised conversation because it is about amalgamation potentially that if not privatisation, when councils lose some of their water assets and their base, which is a power base, that might lead to a bigger discussion. So my question there, is there going to be any reference to that? And the balance sheet stuff, because I think people are going to just go, well, what does that mean for us in terms of us being able to raise revenue for other things?
So if I can just touch on privatisation first, pick the easy one first.
It's actually about amalgamation.
Yep. So the conversation will not talk about amalgamation beyond a water services organisation. So this is not a conversation for council amalgamation. So the conversation will be very much limited to a joined up water services entity. So the balance sheet, so to Andrea's point earlier, we're working through that at the moment. So what's the equitable transfer look like? How do we explain why that's different? What are the financial impacts? What does it mean for our residual balance sheet? All of that needs to be explained in as simple as possible manner. And that is a challenge, and so we are actively working on that at the moment. We haven't landed it, otherwise we'd be sharing it with you here, but it's something we are having to work through for sure.
Thank you. Thanks, Margot and Lexi. That was very informative. Well, it is. Oh, well, it's only a 1 minute to answer and ask it.
You might like my question. This government's been quite hostile towards the environment and Indigenous people. This bill, will that put limits on our ability to be able to do some of the things that we consider are important?
Yes.
Possibly the way it is currently drafted, but it is limiting for all councils, not just ourselves. So, but it depends what comes through the submission process and whether it would be redrafted and before it's enacted.
That wasn't a small question. Right, okay. Thank you, Margot and Lexi. We will come back at 4 o'clock for our final session of the afternoon. Thank you.